Hello, ladies and gents. Hope you're well. Hope you had a fantastic day so far. I'm back this week with a brand new angle and also a brand new interview with the lovely ladies from a wonderful entertainment company who I was able to film and also work with after Andover Carnival. So that was really exciting. And I get to introduce them in a moment. So thank you for them for coming on. And we were able to talk about everything they do, how the pandemic kind of was for them, but also how, us as business owners really sometimes overdo it, but also about why we overdo it and how we really do that. And there's also some fun questions in there as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Kate to explain a little bit more about what she does, and I'll see you very, very soon.
Hi there, my name's Kate and this is my business partner Grace.
Hello.
And we run Jollypop Entertainment Ltd. We're a high quality children's entertainment company and we specialise in characters for parties and events.
Hello, ladies. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for the time. And, well, where to start is the honest truth. I think the initial question will come when people are, when you say high quality, right? What does that mean, right? Tangibly, because there's entertainment and then there's entertainment, right? It's all subjective within reason. When you say high quality, what does that mean?
So when we say high quality, we mean costumes that are very high quality, wigs that are really high quality, performers who will embody the character that you've booked, really just bringing them to life and bringing it to another level. So I think we've all met people who go to a booking in a dress, but there's a really big difference between going to a booking in a dress and really becoming the character. It's about creating something really magical and special, and we really put so much time and effort into just making it something extra special.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as well, something Kate's not mentioned, and I can't believe she hasn't because it's really her thing, is singing. So our princess and fairy tale characters, for example, all sing. And that's something that we really pride ourselves on delivering at a really high quality consistently across our company as well, which is something that I'm really proud of that we do.
Me too.
That's great. I mean, I think, to give the audience some context that don't know, I mean, we initially met. I didn't really gauge a lot of it because it wasn't me meeting the people, it was me meeting characters, which just goes to what we were just talking about. At Andover Carnival, on arguably one of the hottest days of the year, I think it was. It was a bit uncomfortable for, I think, everyone involved. However, lovely day, right? And was quite magical. And the thing that stood apart to me, because obviously in my role I've filmed many different things that are quite similar. And there is sometimes a level of disconnect in backstage-esque areas, right? And for me, it was slightly jarring, I'll be honest, to go backstage and everyone still being in character. I was just like, guys, you're backstage. You're backstage, right? No one's here is going to judge you if you're not in character. But I think it says something to your quality of work, what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it. I mean, I know we discussed a little bit before we began with the podcast, like where your beginnings were and then the transition through, but how do you come up with this idea, right? Because it's got to be like, in some ways it's a fantasy dream, right? Because it's like, oh my God, this is just great fun. But also that's got to be in the same way kind of scary and kind of like, the stakes are really high because you are quite literally putting childhood characters to life without sounding odd. With that being said, so kind of how do you get? I mean, I guess the question there is, how did you get started in doing this?
So, I mean, both Grace and I had a lot of experience working with children and working with children within the entertainment industry. And we could really see that there was a gap in the market for something that was consistently high quality. I know I keep using the word high quality, but there was a lot of varying qualities, and there never really seemed to be something that was what we envisaged, this kind of extra high quality, magical, always being in character, because you can even make adults believe. And genuinely, I think you're doing your job properly if an adult goes to, oh my goodness, I've just met my favorite character, and when they start buying into it. And it's really amazing to see it kind of come to life. But we saw this gap in the market for something that was just a bit extra. And we were sat in this living room. Yep. And decided, you know what, I think we can do it. Yeah. And we kind of did.
And we just went for it. And I think as well, it's something which lends itself so much to the skills that Kate and I already have with children and with acting and singing. And it was just something that we really loved doing. And we just wanted to kind of bring our love of the fairy tale characters and of entertainment to other people. And then actually, as we got more and more into it, we found that other people wanted to come on board and people were requesting different characters that we couldn't play ourselves. So our business has grown and grown because we found that there are other people who have the same passions and skills as we do. So, yeah.
And there's nothing like seeing the look on a child's face when you walk in and they just light up. And it's
an incredible feeling. Yeah.
I think it's really magical, and I think it's something which so many people do, but not necessarily everyone does it to the same level, right? And I mean that in the nicest way possible, not to be like belittling of someone else in that respect, but I think it's really important. I mean, like the magic bit for me, and I saw it at Andover Carnival, and I'm sure there's other examples as well, was exactly that interaction where, because you don't break character, I think even everyone around you sort of gets mystified within reason. And I mean, for me, I'm curious because there's an obvious, like, how did you survive the pandemic, I think, question, right? Which I want to ask, because your industry, out of all the industries, arguably was the one that got hit the most. I mean, again, that is quite difficult for me to say that, and not very fair for me to say that, but it is one of the ones up there, right? Arguably, it's like one of them. Is it the worst? That's subjective. That's kind of down to what did you do, etc., etc. But I mean, how did you kind of like? What was your day-to-day like pre-pandemic? Let's start there, and then we'll sort of move into like, okay, so the pandemic happened, and then what, right? I mean, because I know the business has luckily grown exponentially, arguably. I mean, from what I've heard and from what I've seen, which has been fantastic, and I think it goes to show and hopefully inspire people that are potentially not growing, or potentially concerned about growing, or potentially about, you know, the looming recession, or the recession we're in, or whatever we actually are in, right? Depending on where you look will depend on the answer. But initially, I mean, what was the day-to-day like in, say, pre-pandemic? So like 2018, 2019, before the world sort of stopped for 2 years.
Yeah, so in pre-pandemic, we'd built sort of a fairly established name for ourselves. We'd started to sort of hire more performers. The company was it was growing, certainly not to the level we are now, but we were kind of in the stage of, okay, we can add more people, doing around sort of 20 bookings or so a month. We'd got some really lovely local events established and some really nice business relationships with local councils and businesses. So it was fairly steady, I think, pre-pandemic.
Yes, and we were both at the time working as teaching assistants as well, kind of to support ourselves financially, because at the time, whilst we were doing well, it wasn't enough to rely on as a kind of full-time income. And then COVID hit and it all changed.
I think COVID was an absolute masterclass in reinventing ourselves pretty much every day. And there was a lot of, what is it that can we do now? You know, what services can we offer? Initially, everything was pretty much online. So it would be things like birthday video messages. We did pen pal letters for a little while. Deliveries where birthday boxes would be posted to children for their birthday, and there would be an accompanying video message with that. And then the restrictions would change and we'd reinvent the services a little bit more. Socially distanced parties happened for a while. Doorstep sweet deliveries, which were socially distanced. It was pretty much just keeping on top of the restrictions and evolving from that, but it was constant.
It was tough, and the tough part would be when we'd be allowed to do a little bit more and then the restrictions would go back tighter again, so then we couldn't do that anymore, and that became frustrating. But I have to say, I found a love of online parties via video streaming with children, and seeing all their little faces pop up on camera and joining in with parties that way was quite sweet, really.
And we had some really great responses. We did a couple of Facebook lives and sort of bedtime story sessions, which were completely free of charge, but it was just kind of keeping people engaged, letting people know we were still here. And it was really lovely to get some of the responses from that, because it gave people something to look forward to, I think.
Yeah.
And particularly when everyone was completely locked away, it just was a nice way of giving something back.
It was, yeah. I did can remember in particular, I did a dinosaur party online, which for some reason that one really took off, didn't it? From the groups we shared it on, and I ended up with thousands of people responding to the event saying they were coming. That was a bit frightening, but it was amazing to have children from, you know, South Africa joining in with the party online and things like that from all over the place, which was really lovely. And then we were really touched, weren't we, that some people made like financial donations and things as you know, in thank you for us to host that party, which was really sweet. So
I think as well, like, the pandemic was a really, I say good, obviously it wasn't a good time for anybody, but it was a time where we were able to really take a step back and say, okay, how can we improve our services? What can we do so that when we come back, we're bigger, better, really making sure that we are providing the best service? Because I know we find now as well, and we did pre-pandemic, that often we'd say, oh, we really want to do this, but we just don't have time. And a lot of those things we then changed over the pandemic because we had the time to sit down and go, okay, now we can do this. Let's look at this now. Let's upgrade this. Let's change the way we do this. And I think we really used that time to our advantage. It was hard, but now we're sort of seeing the benefits of that.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, there's obviously a lot of crossover with a lot of other businesses that I hopefully did the same, right? But I think, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you is like something which I throw in, which is like, if you could change the pandemic so it didn't happen, or it happened for less time, or etc., would you? So, you know, just think about your answer there potentially. But because I think it's an interesting point of view, and for me, I'll give you my answer first. I wouldn't, because it was the ability for me to actually, number one, put myself in the position where, yes, I'm serious. Yes, I know what I'm doing. And also now, like, looking at the quote unquote recession, or looking at the harder times to come that people keep implying, it kind of means I'm not as worried about it, because I was like, well, I've got through no income. I've got through literally it being illegal for me to do my job. Yes. So, yes, this is going to be probably a bit of a bumpy ride, but I question how much harder it can be, right? Now, that might be famous last words, sure, but I kind of do question, like, how much harder it can be. And I know there's going to be a percentage of business owners who either didn't make it or etc., and we'll kind of I think we'll come on to that in a little bit. But I mean, in answer to the question, like, if you could change the pandemic, obviously you can't, we're talking in theoretical, but if you could change the years of the pandemic or how long it lasted, etc., would you?
I mean, obviously from a health point of view for everybody, if we could prevent all the horrible things that happened, definitely. But I think from a business sense, actually, I think we really thrived from having to reinvent ourselves. And I think it just made us almost think more like business people. I think sometimes we suffer from we're performers, not business people heads, and get very stuck into the whole performance element of it. But I think we are more business savvy for having to come up against those challenges. So I mean, yes, obviously it'd be lovely if it hadn't happened, but I think it was, in a way, a really good time for us to just be better.
Yeah, it was. It allowed us time to reflect, to take time practically, but also, you know, time to think and really kind of consider what we wanted from our business. And also it allowed us to see what was really important to our clients as well. And our clients got in touch with us and they said, you know, my child's really missing being able to see your characters and missing the princesses. And we were able to see kind of how important the service that we offer actually is to some of the families that we provide our services for, which, you know, for me, it made me see how actually what we do is important to people. Entertainment really matters. And yeah, so yeah, of course, you know, it was a really difficult time for lots of us, and I would love to go back and erase those difficult times for people, but also I think we and lots of businesses were able to use the time for some good as well.
And I think it's an interesting question, right? Because there's kind of two approaches to it. Number one, for me anyway, personally, is I wouldn't, because I'm actually able to be where I am at because I've gone through that and because I've been able to develop that. I mean, the kind of follow-on question I had was, if you hadn't had to have gone through it, so let's say you had started your business like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and then you were just in the starting period when the pandemic happened, and now you were coming through, and like, you know, everyone's coming out and everyone seems to be having parties, and, you know, you seem to be in the prime thing to be doing. Do you think there would have been, like, you would have been as strong or you would have been as busy if you hadn't had that, like, very structured time which you speak of, you know, in business, actually treating your business as a business, right? Which sometimes I think in business, especially when we do what we really enjoy, we can sometimes let the business side of it fall away because we're not as selly or markety or whatever that we need to be, because we enjoy it, right? Because we enjoy what we're doing, etc. And as long as we make enough, surely that's all right. I mean, do you think you would be, as, just to reiterate the question, do you feel you would be in a stronger, like a weaker or stronger position to, like, if you had maybe taken the time off during the pandemic?
I think if we'd taken the time off, we'd be in a much weaker position, because I think you reap what you sow. You know, if you put the effort and if you put the energy in, you get that back. And I just don't think stepping back really was ever an option for us at that point, because people move on, they go to the people who have been putting the effort in. You know, visibility is so important. I think had we just gone, oh, we're just gonna stop for a couple of years, it would have been really hard to then regain that following, to then, you know, still be in the forefront of people's minds and whatnot. So yeah, I don't think we would have been in the position we are now if we'd have done that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, of course, there were times where we were forced to step back in some ways. Both Kate and I have had COVID ourselves, and we're not very well with it. So there were times when we were kind of dealing with that as well. But I think being able to kind of, you know, keep going with it, at least to some extent, really helped us to keep links with our clients.
And I think so many people sometimes struggle or sometimes are concerned when they don't see a very quick return on their energy and time, right? Because we're in a society where social media is designed to, I do an action, I get dopamine back, right, quite quickly. E.g., I put a post out, it gets likes. I write a comment, it gets replied to. I send a message, it gets replied to. And I think that's can be quite a dangerous situation to be in, because some of the best things in life are actually things that take a lot of time, energy, and resources to actually obtain, right? So, you know, a meaningful relationship, a meaningful business, so on, a child, God forbid, you know, are huge in time and energy and investments, right? And the same about a business. I mean, what I was just thinking of when you were talking about there is, like, what advice would you give to your younger selves, right? So you're, let's say, 5 years in, maybe 6 years in. If you could talk to day 2, day 3, day 4, what would you say to those ladies who have this vision, who have this, like, we love it, it's amazing, but they don't know what to come?
I mean, is it really bad that I want to say make the most of the sleep you can get?
Fair enough.
Oh, that's really hard.
Well, I think I have an answer to that one. I think when we first started out, I felt very much, you know, I know that we can do a good job entertaining at parties, and I know that we can sing and we can act like characters. But what I didn't know is that we would be able to build a business like this. You know, we didn't really have business skills. No. That wasn't really our thing. We were just performers. But actually, that between us, and I have to say Kate's put in most of the work here, we have been able to build a business which is really successful and providing opportunities to other performers as well. And I think I would have, if I could give myself some advice, I would just tell myself to have a bit more confidence, I think, in the pair of us, that actually that is something that's achievable. And we did.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think it's easy when we have the hindsight, though, right? To say, yes, we did it. Yes, I made a successful business. But the reason why I always ask that question is because it's really interesting to hear the answer, because sometimes we don't reflect as much as potentially we should on where we've either come, because we're constantly in the mantra or the concept of, right, I have these hours in the day, how much can I get done, right? I don't know, but that's just me, but it seems to be every business owner I talk to is, how much can I get done in the allocated amount of time I have today? And I think sometimes, especially as I've matured in business, actually taking a step back and either reflecting or just taking a breath is actually just as beneficial as me sitting here recording this podcast with you, and or having sales meetings, and or creating marketing plans, or so on. Because it's not even necessarily related to the burnout side of it, but it's, of course, there's that element, but it's actually to just give yourself a moment of breath to say, actually, yes, I've achieved these things. Actually, that's really cool. And then I can say, okay, well, do I still want to go in the direction I feel that I need to? I mean, looking forward, let's say 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, where do you potentially see what you're doing? Do you guys see that you're potentially going to move maybe away from actually being characters and more sit in a maybe managerial role? Or do you always want to have that level of connection with, I'm going to call it the bottom level, but not to mean it's less important than anything else, just because it's the bottom level, because it has those touch points with the kids, with the families, with the parents, with the clients. And I would be curious to see how you were going to tackle that, because obviously there's a scaling issue within reason if you're looking to scale, because if you're here talking to me, you can't be a character at a party.
Yeah,
exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, we have been thinking about this quite a lot recently, because there is a limit on how long we can realistically portray very young princesses. So there will be a point where we will have to take more of a managerial role and take a bit of a step back from performing, although there are some characters that progressing on we could still do, but it wouldn't be to the same level that we are now. Things that we've sort of looked at are potentially franchising, because I know you said about scalability, but I think that is a way potentially to scale the business up and then kind of manage the franchisees, or just manage the branch that we have here. We are definitely hoping to hire more people, because that is essentially where it will grow. And I'm hoping to potentially build some connections with local performing arts schools to really help with the sort of demand we have for stuff, because even now that is something that we do quite often struggle with, is just there is so much demand for what we do now, and physically we cannot do it between the two of them. So yeah, I think definitely in terms of future, stepping back, managing, looking at franchising, just really seeing how we can grow it and bring magic to people even further out would be really lovely.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
I love it when we agree.
I mean, this would be a really awkward thing if we didn't. Like, great, cool.
Don't at all. Rubbish.
Actually, Kate, I don't really like that idea. I'll be honest with you. It's a really bad idea. And I think there's so much of it that there's so much you could do with it. I think the question will become like, what do you actually want to do, right? And you know, we talk to business owners and we support them in their growth. So there's obviously that question of, okay, well, why do you want to do this content? What's the point? Because otherwise you're just doing content for the sake of doing content, which, yeah, you can, but there's not much reason to. And I think for me, I think it's really important to have a clear vision of what the next steps are for a business. And something that I didn't have for a long time was a clear step forward, because it allows you to have meaning in everything you do. So, you know, I was talking to my coach last night about this, and I was saying, well, you know, I feel like some of the stuff I'm doing at the moment is busy work, right? It's not actually meaningful work. It's just work for the sake of doing work, right? And yes, it's lovely, and yes, it's enjoyable, but what tangibly is it actually doing for the business? Or is it too long term for me to potentially even see a return on it now or in the next year? I mean, how do you gauge the difference between doing busy work and not busy work, actual meaningful work? Because I think, especially in what you do, right, there's a lot of what could be perceived as busy work if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment I am finding that we're very reactive just because of the volume of what is coming in. And I do definitely want to look at us being more proactive in terms of, okay, we're popular, we're busy, now let's kind of seek out the opportunities that we want rather than just proactively, reactively taking the ones that come. We've got some great relationships with lots of different clients, but I would like to look at expanding sort of our events. In particular, our event entertainment is something I really want to look at growing and moving that way.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something that we're kind of working on at the moment, which I think is really meaningful, is kind of developing relationships with new venues and things like that, and thinking about kind of the new kinds of events and things that we can do to really kind of expand on what it is that we offer and the experiences that we offer children and adults sometimes, and those kinds of things. But actually, I think I would argue that because ultimately all of our work, everything we do, results in a children's party or an event, that actually all of that builds towards something which is really magical and meaningful, even if the end result of that particular thing isn't expanding our company or moving us on in any way, that it just all feels so meaningful to us, I think.
And also because so much of what we do is sort of word of mouth, that every booking that we do in a sense is growing what we do, because people see it and then go, that was really great, they tell their friends. So to be honest, pretty much every booking that we do, it's kind of like, okay, well, this is still a really big thing, because you just don't know where it's going to lead. You don't know who's going to be there, and whatever happens, there's a child who's really excited to see you.
And we still get nervous for every party. Before we go inside, I have butterflies in my tummy for every single party, because it is the weight of that responsibility for every booking. And it's exciting, isn't it? Yeah.
I think I'm glad you mentioned the kind of like the nerve side of it, because I think there's lots of talk around it of like, are you self-confident, or why are you nervous? Like, I get it sometimes when I'm giving talks or giving presentations, especially longer ones. And I think it's because you care about the outcome, from what I've heard and what I know. And it's not questioning that you're not good within yourself. It's actually like, hey, I can technically do this wrong, arguably, in my own eyes. But I think actually leaning past that, actually you doing it your way is sometimes even better than doing it the way you had in your head, right? Because I think that's what makes it unique. Because yes, you're emulating, in your case, yes, you're emulating characters, but also there's going to be situations which they don't have a playbook for, so to speak, right? Where you have to kind of improvise and tweak and change and so on. And I mean, I've seen a handful in just our very short working relationship, but I can only imagine when it's a kid's party that there's that on steroids. And I guess the question there is like, how do you develop the either the kind of like that sixth sense to think, okay, I'm going to do this next, outside of practice, which is the easy answer. How do you sort of develop that kind of like instinct based thing? Because, and the reason why I'm asking is because there's so much in business, and I do things in business. I know many business owners who do things out of complete and utter instinct. They can't tangibly tell you why they're doing this thing. They just know it's a good idea, and they feel like it's a good idea. I mean, is there? I imagine there's stuff that you do, but how did you did you always have that? Was it always something which you were like, yeah, this just feels like a good idea?
I mean, I think a lot of it we've learned as we've gone along. Certainly things like room management and just thinking on your feet, because to be honest, 99% of our job is thinking on your feet and going, okay, this is the situation I've been presented with. I'm going to do this instead.
Yeah.
Because you just can't know until you walk into a venue what space you're going to have, how many children you're going to have, if they're going to be shy, if they're going to be rowdy, if there's going to be a room full of adults shouting at the back, if there's going to be a massive bouncy castle in the middle of the room. So to be honest, one of the first things we say to our performers is you have to be able to think on your feet. You know, it is just intrinsically part of what we have to do.
Yeah.
And it is something we've built up. I mean, both Grace and I have also worked within education, which I think has fed into a lot of what we do, because again, within an environment in a classroom, you have to have those room management skills, and you also have to be able to change plans up a little bit if for whatever reason something doesn't go to plan. So some of those skills I think we already had.
Transferable skills. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we provide our performers every time they go to a party with a party plan, so a kind of list of activities and the order that we think they probably will want to do them in, and that's based on kind of years of experience of what gets kids going at the start of a booking, and then when you might need to calm them down with a sitting down activity. But we always caveat that to our performers with this idea that actually you don't know exactly what the children will be like, and you might need to change that. And actually our team are getting really good at doing that. And it's something that a skill that we've really kind of developed. And Kate and I, when we work together, we have a kind of natural chemistry between us and are able to bounce off each other and kind of read each other's minds. It's a bit spooky, but we always just kind of know that the other one's got our back. We know what's happening if somebody says something that, oh, that's not what I thought was happening next, and we just go with it, because I think that's the experience of working together, isn't it?
Yeah. And you know, you can just give me a look and I'm like, yep, okay, we're changing the plan.
We're not doing that then. Yeah.
Oh, it's always fun working together.
Yeah, it's our favorite.
I think it's so much about, I mean, like, there's so many examples in other industries as well, right? Like where stuff doesn't go to plan. I mean, video production is just notoriously filled with, it's now raining and it's not meant to be. There's now not this person that's meant to be here and this person's here, so on, right? But I mean, you're right in the respect of like, there's a level of experience, there's a level of like professionalism within reason that you come with, but also I think it just comes with like you build those instincts because of the relationship you have with the work you previously done, but also you have a level of, I guess, quality of work within your own mind where you just sort of twist and make it work no matter what happens. And I think that's what can stand certain businesses apart from others, right? Because for me, especially when I look to work with other people on set, there's a kind of element of you need to kind of predict what's gonna happen before it even happens and already have a solution for it before it's even gone wrong. Because if you don't, it means we're going to be there for a while trying to fix the problem. So, you know, for me, you can only prepare so much. And, you know, on every campaign we do or every video or set of videos we do, there's always a level of structure, but there's also enough looseness in that structure where the things that are going to go wrong will not knock that structure off specifically. And I, you know, from what it sounds like, you guys have the same thing. And I think it's an interesting mindset to have, but it kind of bridges on to the next question I had, which was around motivation, because so many people when they work for themselves, one of the things I hear about a lot is they struggle to go, because they go from a traditional working environment where, right, you're in at 9 o'clock and you finish, you have lunch at 1 o'clock and then you go home at 5, right? When you work for yourself, there's no one there to tell you that, right? Which is great in one perspective, because if I don't want to work at 9 and start work at 9, I won't. But also, I think it's about how do you find that, I guess the question there is, how do you find that either the motivation to do it when you don't want to, if you need motivation to do it, and or how do you keep your work-life balance for you? Because everyone's work-life balance is different, right? But how do you balance that? Because I think as entrepreneurs and people who work for themselves, we can either go into one or two camps, kind of depending on where we are in the business. Either we're completely all in and it's the only thing we're doing all of the time, or we're the opposite, right? Yeah. And I mean, it's a funny story because I remember we were doing the videos from Andover Carnival, and I can't remember specifically why, but it was like, sorry for the late reply, I had to get angel wings or something, fairy wings. I was just like, out of any of the people who would send me a message like that, this doesn't even faze me, right? But it's a key. The reason why I bring it up is it's an example of so much can happen within a day that's not strictly planned. And I mean, I guess the kind of combination question there is, how do you deal with things that don't happen, like going to get wings, for example, and or have that balance where you're not all in, or are you all in all the time? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, how do you deal with that? Because I think for me, that's one of the common issues with business, quote unquote, is it's a constant yardstick. You're constantly moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I took over kind of daily admin / running of the business from November full time. So it's kind of been an interesting journey on that, going from, I used to work part-time as a teaching assistant alongside this, but it got to the point where there just weren't enough hours in the day. It's still like that, to be fair. But it is an interesting change. And you do find days where you think, oh, I just don't want to get up and answer emails, but you just kind of have to. I would say that work-life balance is still something that I think we're both struggling with.
Yeah.
With the volume of demand and everything, we are finding that the company is growing so much that even with me doing that full time, there just aren't enough hours in the day to answer all the emails, wash all the costumes, restyle all the wigs, pick up fairy wings, drop equipment off to everybody. I mean, we've had weekends where we've been doing sort of 12, 14 bookings, and obviously all of those bookings have different costumes, different equipment bags, different party plans, and it is quite overwhelming sometimes. But I think when you're building something that you really love, you've just got to put the hours in. That's just what it is. You obviously will get to the point where the work-life balance is better, I hope. That's my hope. But when you're building something you're really proud of, you kind of want to put the hours in because you want it to be the best it can be. And it is kind of your life. I mean, I don't know if that's what it's supposed to be, but I feel like if you're making your own business, it kind of should be your life, at least for a little bit, because you have to put those hours in to really create something special, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't really give advice on work-life balance because I haven't got that yet.
I think neither of us are great at work-life balance. We're in a different position to the one that we were in pre-COVID, where we were both working as teaching assistants as well, in that Kate now full-time Jollypops and I have a full-time job now as an English teacher. So sometimes for me, it's the case that I just work 7 days a week because I teach 5 days a week and then do parties for the 2 weekend days. And it can go 8 weeks with no days off at all. And I think the same probably could be said for Kate, because taking any day off of admin is really difficult.
Yeah, the thing is, you take a day off, and then by the time you've taken that day off, everything has built up even more, and it just sometimes it's just not worth to take the day off.
I think the answer really is that it's full on, and work-life balance isn't a thing, but it is a thing that we love. And if it wasn't something that we loved, we wouldn't do it.
No.
Because it would be exhausting to work this hard for something that we weren't really passionate about.
But we are also seeing the results of that. And I think it makes the hard work worthwhile when you see that you're winning awards, that you're doubling the business that you've done. It's kind of like, okay, it's hard work, but it's paying off. When we go sort of plus 50 bookings in a month from pre-pandemic doing 20, you kind of go, okay, I know I'm working hard, but here are the results. You know, this company is flourishing.
And those little magical moments that we have. We did an event this morning, which was just lovely, wasn't it? And just so many children smiling and singing along with us. And that really made me kind of reflect on why we do it.
And I think I'm glad you mentioned the why, because I think it's important to actually have that why, right? And when I say have it, I mean like really, really understand it. Because if you don't, to everyone else that don't understand the why and don't understand the reason, all they can see is an obsession, right? Which it is, that's what it is, but it's an obsession for a longer term objective. From every business owner I've spoken to, and me personally as well, it's an obsession in the short term so that it's not an obsession in the long term, is the best way I can describe it. And the reason why I mention that is because some people, I think, and I had this when I wasn't a business owner yet, I was thinking about the idea and I wanted to do it. Everyone sees the results or they see the success, but they don't necessarily see the maybe slightly too much at night, maybe waking up a little bit too early, maybe doing a little bit, I'm going to do an extra bit of work, extra as in 3 hours, etc., that happen, right? And you know, the key example of this in my world is, like, I use Andover Carnival as an example because it's a mutual one. That day started at 1 PM and finished at nearly 4 AM, I think, for me. And it was like, when you say that to most people, they don't necessarily appreciate how long that is of constant focus. There was about a gap of maybe an hour and a half in that time where I wasn't absolutely focused on what I was trying to achieve and what I was doing. But the thing is that I always say to people is, what are you willing to do now so that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do in 10 years? Because I think especially when we are younger, we're in the position where we have more energy to burn, right? But do you use that energy effectively, right? If you're not necessarily doing something that you love. And I think for me, it's about, as long as you are content within yourself and you know what you need to do to look after yourself, it doesn't actually matter. Let me ask you, I kind of think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Have you had times where your friends and family think you're overdoing it and they are coming from a place of care and they are basically saying you need to stop because I'm concerned you're going to have a heart attack, whatever, blah, 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 blah. I mean, and if you have, how have you handled and or dealt with that from an emotional point of view? Because I imagine these are people who genuinely care about you, right? And then how have you changed your approach so that you maybe pull away? Sometimes you don't do as much of those extra hours that you potentially could do. And or how do you sort of deal with that, right? Because I think one of the things we have as business owners, especially when we do things what we love, quote unquote, is we will sometimes get blindsided, and sometimes even when people, the first time that someone you really care about says, look, I'm really worried about you, that's a very chilling experience from my experience anyway. I mean, how did you kind of deal with that, or kind of work through that, or kind of move forward through that? Because I think it's something which every business owner will have to deal with at least once.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I think we've had those thoughts about each other at times.
Yes. We often say,
Like,
go and rest,
go and
please, I've got
sleep.
this. Yeah.
I think, to be fair, neither of us would be surprised by a conversation like that, because we recognize in ourselves that at the moment we are pushing ourselves quite hard.
Yeah.
But I think the people close to us also recognize what we're achieving, and I've certainly found that sort of families, my partner works for the company, so he doesn't get away with it either. So they all kind of just support as much as they can. Really lucky in that sense. Bless her, my mum gets roped in all of the time. But she loves what we do as much as we do. And I think we're really lucky to have that sort of support system. Yeah. I honestly don't know what I'd do without it a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think the most difficult thing I find with kind of burnout and this idea that I've got to stop working at some point is I'm a parent as well. So I've got 2 children. So sometimes I have to put work down, but then I'm not always actually resting when work is down, because I have other important kind of things that I have to do there as well. And I think it's sometimes recognizing that time with family, and sometimes when family say, you need to stop working, actually sometimes I think that comment isn't about us. It's about the fact that they need the time with us as well. And I think that's something that maybe both of us need to be quite conscious of, is that our families need us as well. And I think that's important, that sometimes for all business owners, it's important to recognize that putting work down sometimes isn't just something we do for us, but for our families. And I'm working on that. But it's tough.
I'd love to say I'm working on that. I'm not sure that I am, but in theory,
trying really hard. Yeah.
I've been on holiday. It's fine.
I mean, I agree. I think it's about appreciating why you're doing it, right? Like whether that's for you, whether it's for family, whether it's for your kids, whether it's for your partner, etc. And about having clear communication about the reasoning behind why, right? Because, if it is your partner, if it is your parent, if it is your kids, or maybe not in the kids' case because it's harder if they're younger, but I think for me, that's where the level of communication really has to come from both sides. Because if it's truly important to you as a person, then your partner should want to support that, or your family should want to support that within reason. But also on the other side of that, you also need to as you say, you need to appreciate that sometimes they might just miss you and they might just want to have time with you, and sometimes that's possible, sometimes that isn't. And if it isn't, I guess the question there is, how do you tackle, because I imagine there's a world where like your partner, for example, says, oh, I would love to spend time with you, I miss you, blah blah blah, or they need a date night or whatever, they need some time, they need some time with you, but it's actually feasibly not possible for like 2 weeks, just because of work and life and so on. I mean, how do you tackle that conversation? Because that's got to be one of the hardest to have, surely. Because that person wants a specific answer, but you can't give them that answer, right?
To be fair, my partner's really understanding about that. We had that exact conversation last night, in fact. He was at quiz night with his friends and he was like, oh, come on over. And I'm like, I'm really sorry, I've got all of these emails to answer, I've got this wig to wash, I just can't. But he's really good with that, to be fair. It's never a fun conversation to have. No. And you don't want to miss out on, celebrations or birthday parties, ironically. Grown-ups' birthday parties.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just have to. And I think most of the time, most of our family friends are fairly understanding of the fact that our availability is probably very different to somebody who works sort of 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, where most people would go out on a Saturday night. A Saturday night is kind of like what needs to be prepped for Sunday, who needs what, where does this equipment need to go. Again, it's finding the balance, and sometimes you just have to go, okay, I'm going to go to this function, it's going to mean I'm going to have a really late night, but
it's got to happen. And sometimes it's a little bit about really planning in advance, because we book up so far in advance. If I know that I might want a weekend day free at some point, I need to kind of be on top of that and mark in our calendar, I'm not going to work on October 23rd, for example, because I know that I'm going to want a day to celebrate somebody's birthday that week. So I'll keep that one clear. It's just about kind of, you know, having those conversations with friends as well. You know, I really want to meet up with you, but if we don't set a date soon, I'm going to run out of dates that are available. So yeah, good planning, I think.
I think sometimes people really struggle to get their heads around quite how far in advance we book.
Yeah.
But we're nearly fully booked for Christmas, and people getting their heads around that, and also October half term for sort of Halloween. So people go, oh, I want to see you on this month. And I'm like, well, get in there soon.
Yeah. I mean, I think especially as those who don't work in the spaces, you know, like the concept, like we're starting to have conversations about Christmas now, right? But most people aren't even thinking about Christmas until after Halloween. But the thing is, like, for anyone who actually works in Christmas, it's not December that we're talking about. It's November, right? And potentially even late October, right? The kind of the day after Halloween, really, if I'm honest, is like when you start really souping up for Christmas. And I think once you've gone through the cycle a couple of times, you kind of know what's going to happen to an extent. I mean, the same in, like, you know, I expect August to be quite quiet because on average it normally is. Holidays, kids, so on. And the thing is, it's like, okay, so then how do I use this time effectively so that come September, when we're probably going to get quite busy from a production point of view, I'm not either screwed and or I can still be creating content, having content going out. So how can I use the times when I am freer to actually leverage so then I've got stuff that I can then use when I'm not as busy, right? Or when I am as busy, sorry. And I think the main thing there is just like building and having a level of discipline that no matter, even when your calendar isn't full, right? Because I imagine like the weekdays potentially for you guys is like, well, there's technically no events on. So like, I know I need to be like working, but what tangibly do I need to do? I mean, that's quite easy if you've got a bulging inbox. But if you don't, you know what I mean? Like, how do you sort of, I guess in some ways, how do you either self-motivate yourself or how do you find those other things to do when you don't have reactable tasks to do, e.g. inboxes, Facebook messages, so on?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, if we get to the point where we don't have reactable things, I'll totally let you know. At the moment, it's just it's more trying to find the days to fit in everything that needs doing rather than the other way around. I mean, I have things in the back of my head that I'm like, if I get a spare 5 minutes, I'd really like to contact this client or work on this project. I'd love for us to start working on sort of theatre for schools. So sort of touring shows to go around schools and whatnot. It's something we've wanted to do for a really long time, but just have not physically had the time to set up. So there are things that we would definitely pursue if we weren't constantly reactive, but at the moment it is just, even this month, which is quieter because of the holidays, even in those weeks there are still so many costumes to wash, so many wigs to do.
It's a tight schedule of getting things sorted after one weekend and ready for the next weekend.
And the difficulty with holidays like this, even though they're quieter, is that we quite often have weekday events, which then takes me away from sort of the day-to-day weekday tasks that I'm supposed to be doing. And then that sort of has a knock-on effect. So for instance, this week we had a booking yesterday, we've had one today, we've got another one tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, and then we go into a week-long event starting Monday next week. So we've got nearly 2 weeks of solid something happening every day, which wouldn't usually happen during a time sort of term time because kids are at school. But that in itself has created a bit of a, okay, I'm not going to be home to do the day-to-day tasks. So managing that is quite tricky sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because I think so many industries will have different like realities in the holidays or in general, right? And I think what the potential listener can take from that is actually develop strategies to know when you're going to be busy and know what you need to have done, or like be ready to have done quickly. You know, and one of the things that I try to do is try to be as little reactive as possible. So, you know, and that's sometimes not possible. But the reason why is because then I'm in complete control over what happens. So instead of, right, the first thing I'm going to do on a Monday morning or on a morning is open my emails. Great. That's a doomed beginning of the day. Do something which is like tangibly going to grow the business. So that's creating content or building a new relationship or sending out a set of emails related to a invoice generating activity. That's not, I'm going to answer a bunch of emails, because I think it's really important to sometimes establish the difference. And I mean, I'm conscious of time, so I think let's wrap up soon, but I wanted to give you ladies an opportunity, if you did want to ask and throw in a question or a topic for us to discuss for a couple of minutes. If you have one, again, it's not, everyone thinks it's a trick question. It's not. I mean, did you have one, or did you have anything you wanted to ask me specifically?
Oh, I don't know. I was not prepped for giving a question.
Yeah, kind of. Oh, goodness me. A question for who? For your audience?
It can be for my audience. It can be for me. It can be a topic. It can be anything you like.
Okay. A question for you then. Tell us what the biggest challenge in running your own business has been.
Do you want to give context on time or just in general?
Ever.
Yeah.
I mean, ever is quite simple, actually. It's a lot more simple than like if you said this week or this month. The ever is just continuing to find ways to grow in a constantly changing environment. Because for me, and I'm sure you found it as well, the last 4 years, I mean, the first year, I didn't know what I was doing, so that doesn't even count. It was just, let's do some stuff and let's see what hits the wall. After that, when I kind of started to know what I was doing, I had a changing environment, followed by a changing environment, followed by a changing environment, followed by a new changing environment, especially in Salisbury, because at that point we had Novichok, then we had COVID, and now we have a recession, right? And the crux of what I've kind of learned from that is actually there is never a good time to do anything. There is never a good time to invest. There's never a good time to expand. There's never a good time to do this or that, whatever it may be. You have to make the best of the time that you have, right? And I think there is going to be better times, right? It's not, there's no way it can continue to be as troublesome, but there'll always be something, right? If it's not a recession, it will be something else, or there'll be something that a percentage of people will use as an excuse to be the reason why they're not growing, or why they're not developing, or why they're not offering more to their clients. And that's, I think, the point of importance. And I think for me, that's why, because people ask me all the time, it's like, how are you growing? How are you continuing to focus? How are you not like overwhelming, you know, when things get quieter, etc.? How do you continually to like know what to do? And the honest answer is I either know all the time or I don't know any. There's no middle ground. It's either you sort of can feel it out, and it kind of builds back to what we were talking about earlier about instincts. When you've been in business long enough, and I don't know whether you guys have found this as well, you kind of feel out what, okay, I should be doing this kind of thing now. Okay, I should probably, it's been enough time where I can ask that client, are we good to go, or etc., especially if there's lead time on something. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. It was a good answer to my really well prepared question.
I totally want to ask like a non-serious question. Yeah, I think it's too fun. So just because of what we do, if you could play any character for us, who would you play and why?
It's a very interesting question. Who would I play? I mean, if you're just going off the hat, it would have to be Peaky Blinders, obviously. But that's the easy one. Can I go with that? That's the easy one, but can I go with that?
I like that. We'll consider it.
What? And there's a backstory behind that I'll have to share another day because we're out of time. It's a real shame. I'll have to get you lovely ladies back at some point to tell that story. But for those who are interested in hearing more about what you do, maybe want to get in contact with you, maybe want to see more of your work, etc. Where's best for us?
So we're on Facebook under Jollypop Entertainment. We're always contactable via PM on there or via our website, which is www.jollypopentertainment.co.uk. You can find contact forms on there. Either of those are really good to get in touch with us.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone. Yeah.
Thank you for coming back, ladies and gents. I hope to value from that conversation. Thank you ever so much for the lovely ladies from Jollypop for coming and having that hour conversation with me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you took great value from that conversation. And I'll be back very, very soon with some brand new conversations about business ownership, what it's really like, and hopefully give you some more valuable advice on how to grow your business in 2022. So if you would like to hear how video specifically can help your business in 2022, please feel free to find my information somewhere on this video, and I will see you very, very soon.